Loud. All good?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Good morning, LaKisha. Thank you so much for allowing me to interview today for my child well-being interview.
Good
Can I
morning.
start out asking what is your role within the mental health field?
Yes, ma'am. So I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have been licensed in 3 different states, and my degree is both of my degrees, bachelor's and master's, are in social work, and I specialize in families and children and clinical mental health.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm doing a
Well, good.
project on children's well-being, particularly within the school system and how that can affect their well-being with their caregivers and things like that. So,
Okay,
we
awesome.
can jump to it. Did you receive the questions that I sent you?
I did, and I'm sorry, I should have said, and currently I am, in private practice, so, I'm not actually in a school system, but in private practice, but work with lots of children who are in the school system.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Well, for you, how do educational environments influence a child's well-being? Mm.
Educational environments are very important to a child's well-being. You know, that when you think about educational environments, that is where children spend the most of their time and day. If they are going to school outside of the home,
Mhm.
they are spending more time in those educational environments than they are actually in their home most of the time. So it's huge on their mental health, their physical well-being. It's very important. Even when you think about their nutritional needs, their physical needs, they have, physical education there. um uh they're not just learning, it's not just intellectual, it's not just educational. It really, when they're at school, all of their needs should be getting met. So it's hugely important that they are in a healthy educational environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. I didn't think about even just the nutritional and the physical part of it. I know at times
Yes.
there may be times that children, the only meal they're getting is
I
at school.
Yes,
So,
ma'am. I was just about to say that. Their social well-being, all of that, like, all their needs are getting met for 6, 7 hours a day
right.
while they're there.
Okay, well, what role do you think family dynamics, including especially with modern parenting where you have same-sex marriages and, mixed multi-race adoptions, what role do you think that plays in shaping their overall well-being?
Well, one thing I will say when it comes to children, any and every influence that they have is huge, right? Because as soon as they are formed, I'm not even going to say once they're born, as soon as they are formed, they are. Even before birth, any and everything can really kind of influence them. So, of course, just like we just talked about where they're at school, for so many hours of the day. In your developmental formative years, of course, we're all constantly developing. But when
Mhm.
you're a young child, you are developing at such a rapid pace, so fast, so much is happening during those formative years. And being able to have a healthy family dynamic, no matter what the composition of the family is very
Mhm.
important too, because that's where you're launching into the educational environment. So,
Mhm.
having love, support, discipline, and people term these things differently, but discipline is really like what we're teaching our children, how we're teaching them, how to make
Mhm.
decisions. Consequences versus rewards, all kinds of different things. Being able to have a well balanced way of raising your children and considering their developmental ages and stages is very important.
Mhm.
And so we have to have realistic expectations of our children. And so I think, like I said, regardless of the composition of the family, the environment being healthy and supportive and loving is what's most important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. What's an example of a child's social interactions and friendships impacting their well-being?
Hmm. Let's see.
Yes, positively or negatively in that regard.
Okay, okay. Um, you know, I think in terms of social interactions and we have so many ways of interacting these days, right? That's a little bit different. But I think like we were just talking about that healthy having that healthy family dynamic. One of the things that I think is so important with social interactions is teaching our children how to healthily communicate.
Mhm.
Whether we're talking face to face, whether we're talking, we've got social media and all kinds of things now. And I mentioned developmental needs and just what's age appropriate and what's not kind of earlier, how to introduce and when to introduce things to children. But
Mhm.
we're going to be communicating, like I said, even when they're being formed and if they're being carried and whether they're whatever environment they're in, communication is happening, right?
Mhm.
It's happening. They're born into communication. Um,
Right.
and so it's so important to teach them how to communicate, how to give and to receive communication and in a healthy
Absolutely.
manner. So whatever environment they're in, that's going to be important because we can't always be there and control that. We don't
Mhm.
know what communication they're always going to be receiving or be exposed to. And so
Mhm.
really kind of having that in our homes and in our schools kind of built in how to
Mhm.
deal with that to be able to socially interact in a positive manner,
Mhm.
even in negative situations is a
Right.
huge skill that's so important, and really, I mean, can be, almost like a survival skill. I mean, you just really need that. So we need to be communicating with our children like pre-birth. As soon,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
like I said, I keep going to that, but as soon as they're formed,
Mhm.
that's so important.
Mhm. And that's interesting that you mentioned that. There was a discussion I had the other day about basically at the point of conception or, once they can hear to at the point that they're formed, that part, how would you say that obviously like substance abuse and things like that, are those part of the things that are gonna impede a baby developmentally?
Oh, 100%, absolutely. I mean, sometimes by miracles, that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
But if there's anything unhealthy, substance abuse, domestic violence, it, even, the lack that, there's some very stressful, there could be health issues. There's some very stressful situations that can happen sometimes or that children can be born into or conceived in. And so sometimes that's, when I mentioned the communication, like, talking while a child is in utero, sometimes, like, I mean, we got AirPods and stuff now, but back in the day, we had old-fashioned headphones. You could kind of put those in your on your stomach and let
Right.
kids listen to it, or just having music out. And we don't exactly know. I mean, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not about to say
Mhm.
what age they can, but
Right.
really a lot of times as soon as
Mhm.
that is the kind of the best time, because not only if we don't know exactly when, but if it's getting in, that's a good thing, whatever they're taking
Right.
in. And it also helps us to prepare for that. But if it goes the flip side too. If there's anything unhealthy going on, if there's a lot of fighting, conflict, um, lack of nutrition, lack of,
Mhm.
maternal health care. Um,
Right.
you mentioned substance abuse, alcohol abuse, any of those types of things, those can
Mhm.
negatively affect that development, which can
Mhm.
then also impact, kind of go back to the first question we had about the educational environment, right? That can
Mhm.
already be impeding their ability to thrive in the educational environment.
Absolutely. And you did touch on social media and technology. And what are examples of, I'll say we talk a lot about the negative impacts that we have, such as cyberbullying and things. But as far as the positive, what are your thoughts on the positive things that can come from social media?
Okay, so this is funny, right? Because I'll get a lot of the positive aspects, I think, from my clients, from especially like my teenage clients, my preteens. So a lot of them tell me that sometimes, they can connect um, with populations that they wouldn't always be able to. If they feel like sometimes they have a hard time connecting with the people in their classrooms, or you know eh, eh, you know the type of environment, like they may have some social anxiety, they may just have issues connecting.
Mhm.
They don't relate, maybe they don't relate in the neighborhood they live in, or wherever they're connected, whatever communities they're in. That sometimes they feel like they can find connection through people connecting. um what it just escaped me what I'm trying to say. Oh, like let's say there's something they're interested in. The word is escaping me, but
Yeah, no,
through
I got you.
shared ideas and activities and
Mhm.
games,
Even
and
gaming and things, yeah.
and that helps me to understand because I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit old school, so I want them to be able to communicate and relate even when they feel uncomfortable because I know that they're gonna have to do that and need that, and it's not
Mhm.
always gonna be able to be done through a screen. And so
Right.
sometimes they're able to talk to me about how that really helps them. And so
Mhm.
sometimes I try to get them to understand you need a balance. And so,
Mhm.
hey, sometimes you can use that as practice, and that's great. But I don't want that to
Mhm.
be your primary mode because I don't want you to ever be in a situation where you have to face to face,
Mhm.
connect, and you're unable to, or it causes you too much distress. So I think it's useful to be able to incorporate into their life, but very monitored. Um,
Mhm.
trusted adults in their life should monitor it, parents should monitor it, and in moderation, like anything else. It
Right,
just too
absolutely.
too much of anything can sometimes not be a good thing.
Now, in your opinion, because a lot of times we talk about parents and caregivers, especially within blended families, but what about with siblings? In what ways can that affect mental well-being for children? Because sometimes you say at school no one can bully you, but then you come home and you kind of tease each other or things like that. So, what are healthy ways of explaining, particularly to younger children, that their well-being can still be intact even though they're getting teased by an older sibling, especially when that most likely they're looking at the older sibling in awe and they're super excited and they're like, "Oh, this person is so great," but then they're
Mhm.
getting made fun of. And so how do we really dissect, hey, and outside of the walls, that person's probably trying to be mean, but when you're inside the walls, it's out of love without messing up or affecting the child's well-being.
Well, so I'm gonna say something, Kim, that I say all the time. Honestly, no matter what age group that I'm dealing with, no matter what dynamic, no matter, I have a saying where I say healthy relationships are healthy relationships. And what that means is it does not matter what relationship it is, right? It needs to be in order for it to thrive, in order for it to flourish, in order for it to grow, it has to be healthy, just like anything else.
Mhm,
And so again, it's very important that, kids feel loved, supported, no matter what the relationship. And it can be difficult sometimes with siblings, depending on the age difference, right? So
mhm,
that's a whole different thing. And sometimes some of the unhealthy sibling relationships come from either real or perceived unmet needs of one or the other sibling, right? So sometimes there's, sibling rivalry with jealousy, and
mhm,
there is, feeling like one is getting more attention than the other, and all kinds of stuff. And so I think we have to really be intentional
mhm,
about in our families, and if you're a trusted adult outside the family, to pay attention to those dynamics, not to just a lot of times emotional needs are just kind of swept under the rug, like, oh well, that's your brother, you know how he is, or oh that's, and we really shouldn't be doing that. We need to address any and everything that is not healthy in a child's environment. Now, with
mhm,
that said, we need to be clear on what bullying is, because I have seen, just doing this over 25 years, I have seen that pendulum swing from where we're totally ignoring it, and kids being kids and it's okay, to
mhm.
if somebody calls you a name, that's automatically bullying, and it's not.
Right.
And that's hard for people to hear, it's hard for parents to hear, but there's a clear definition of bullying in terms of the frequency, in terms of the intentionality, in terms of the intensity, the
Mhm,
persistence of it. We have got to teach our kids how to deal with negative comments and negative conflict, and just conflict in general. That does not always mean somebody's
mhm.
bullying you. Even if somebody doesn't like you, people don't have to like you. We don't have to like
Right.
everybody. Like but we be kind and compassionate to each. Absolutely. But kind
Mhm,
doesn't always mean everybody's going to be friends. I mean, these are one of the things that we have to definitely prepare our children for are the realities of the world. Otherwise,
Right.
they're going to be walking through blindly. And so every time your child's feelings are hurt, they're not
Mhm.
being bullied. And
Right.
so it's important for us to explain that to them and equip them with how to deal with that and how to openly express to people when they do hurt them or when they are mean to them, and how to deal with setting boundaries so that they
Mhm.
can decide who and what they want to allow in their life, and they can give love and compassion, but not necessarily always access, because maybe that person's not a safe or kind person, but that
Right.
you could still treat them kind, but that may not be a friend. That may not be somebody who walks in life. So defining these things and defining healthy relationships for our kids is very important in and outside the home. And but it does start in the home. So I think making sure we're doing that with sibling pairs, if we have those, or sibling groups, right? Whatever our
Mhm.
dynamic is, we need to be making sure not only are we teaching that and we're showing that, but we're also we're living it, right? So it's an example, because sometimes we teach our kids that, but then they hear us on the phone with our siblings, or we've got siblings we're not talking to for years, or whatever the issue may be. We need to
Right.
explain these things to our kids and what it's about. So that healthy relationship skills and communication skills are so important. As a family, we need to be talking about these things.
Absolutely. No, thank you. That gives a lot of really good insight. Now, how do significant changes such as a divorce, the loss of a loved one, drastic moves, things like, especially with like military kids and things, how can that affect a child's well-being, and what can we do to kind of bridge that gap for that? I know that's kind of a loaded question, but um,
Well, yes, it is a loaded question, but thankfully, I've got experience with this personally and professionally and personally, I should say.
mhm,
Raising, to well, so I'll say, growing up in a single parent household,
mhm,
myself, and having teenage parents, right? And my grandparents being very integral parts of like my childhood and raising, but my mom and I moved quite a bit, right?
mhm,
So, any life changes are huge. And then, getting married and being married to a military member and raising two kids who are military. So it's kind of funny. I used to always joke like I moved more as a kid being non-military than my kids did being military.
right.
Although they didn't move. But it's funny, a lot of times with military kids, some of them move very often, right? So it's hard for them to connect and to make, or sometimes they can connect, but those long-standing relationships, to really kind of grow roots, right? And then sometimes they have issues with wanting to do that because as soon as it happens, we're moving.
Mhm,
Whereas you have the other perspective, like we kind of did, where we would be places long time and kind of think we were going to get stuck there, right? And
mhm,
then it would be pivotal times when we moved. Like we moved here to Georgia when my son was in 8th grade, so he had gone from elementary to middle school, play sports and all that, and he thinking he's going to go to high school with his buddies and play on the same team. Here we're moving, right? Last year,
right,
middle school. Um,
mhm,
and so those, I think, whether we're talking, and of course, divorce, when family dynamics change,
mhm,
that can be huge. Unfortunately, just dealt with that personally a few years ago myself, and having young adult children as going
mhm,
through it. People underestimate how that changes a family dynamic. But when a kid has known a certain life and situation their whole life, and then it changes right before they
mhm,
start college, again, that's a huge thing. You're a young adult, but a lot of people think, oh, well, they're grown, they're graduate, they're 18 now, so it's better. Or at least it didn't
mhm.
happen when they were little kids. And it's like,
No.
well, but if when they were a little kid, they would have gotten used to it. But so the issue is it just
Mhm,
depends on the child, it depends on the family, it depends on what the circumstance is,
mhm,
and it depends on that impact, and it is individual for each and every family, and it's
mhm,
so important for us to take time to pay attention to that, to
mhm,
heal, to get whatever. Of course, I'm gonna be partial about mental health, right? We're mental health professionals, but, making sure whatever our kids need and whatever we need, that those needs are met so that they don't have any gaps in um, being able to express how they feel, being able
mhm,
to get their needs met.
mhm,
And because again, we're constantly developing, right? And so we need to make sure that they have those needs met, even if it's not from us, if it's from other mental health professionals, mentors, other
Mhm.
family, friends, whoever is in their life who can love and invest in them, um,
Right.
to make sure that they are getting what they need. Because the short answer to this long question, right? Even though I kind of is that it hugely impacts. No matter
Absolutely.
what the change is, it hugely impacts.
What
And
strategies
yeah,
can we use to further to support them with those huge, because 'cause they're kind of big things, big
they are.
feelings, and then they don't necessarily know how to process them.
We're going back to communication. You just said that. I love the fact that you used the word process. And
Mhm.
we have to take time to process. Processing takes time. It's not a quick thing. We have to be patient with them if they're not ready to process. Guess what? Processing and not processing is part of the process. It takes a minute sometimes to open up, because when any of these huge changes happen, that sometimes impacts our ability and level of trust and how to trust, right? Um,
Right.
and that's not always personal, right? It's not personal against the parents. It's not sometimes it's I don't trust the process. I don't trust
Mm.
the situation, because a lot of these changes are outside of their control. And so,
Right.
well, and as a parent, I know as a parent, it's outside our control sometimes. So now we've got to help them, right, be able to restore some stability and control where
Mm.
none of us have that control. And so, one of the things that's very important, and has always been a part of my practice, is making sure that we're hitting these things from a systems approach, which means, again, making sure all our needs are met, whether we're talking spiritual, well, we're not whether we're talking, we are talking
Right.
spiritual, mental, emotional,
Mhm.
physical.
Mhm.
Um, that is very important. And it's important for us to teach our kids that. So if any of that is missing, so like I said before, making sure they're connected, with the people who are important in their life. Not just us
Mhm.
as parents, but do they have any mentors? Their friends. Making sure, if we're talking military moves and things like that, making sure we're talking to them about how to stay connected with these people,
Mhm.
right? That, they may feel like they're losing just because they're not seeing them every day.
Mhm.
This is another place where social media and the advances in technology come in, right? Because they can
Right.
connect a little more. Back in the day, it'd be like teaching them how to write a letter to their friend, and, making
Right.
the phone calls and just being intentional. And again, if we're working on these things in our families about healthy relationship skills and staying connected, trust, asking for help. It's okay to get help. It's okay to see a professional. It's
Mhm.
okay to talk to mom or dad or another family member about how you feel, even if it's negative feelings. It's okay to feel negative about something. It's okay to
Mhm.
express, I don't like this,
Mhm.
even though I have to do it,
Right.
and not to have guilt or shame, or they don't, shutting them down like, well, you don't have anything to worry about. You're just a kid. All your needs are met. It's like, well, no, I'm gonna grieve not seeing my
Mm.
friend at school every day. Nothing's too
Right.
small, right? So being intentional about making sure we're taking care of our needs so that we
Mhm.
can be paying attention and making sure they're taking care of theirs, and sharing with them some of our experiences and the stuff we go through too. So they
Mhm.
know we kinda, they're not gonna think we get it, because that's just, but they'll remember as we're going through that we can relate.
Right, absolutely. And it's interesting, I like that you brought up, because there's cultural expectations as well. There's certain cultures that it's like, we don't touch mental health. There's
That's
others
right.
that it's like every little thing, it's like, "Oh, that could be this and that could be that and this."
That's
So
right.
it's like, how do you
That's right.
see that how is that perceived now that there's this shift in mental health as far as culturally? Do you see that there's a shift of kind of more people coming around, or is it still kind of that stigma that exists?
Both. I do. I think, obviously, when we know better, we do better. And I think we're, as a whole, right? Hopefully, what I've seen, because people are a lot more educated about things.
Mhm.
And things are a lot more publicized and public, and, in the media. I think
Mhm.
that, and people are becoming more open about mental health, needs and things like that. I think that,
Mhm.
yes, we're coming around, but very slowly. We're way,
Mhm.
way, way, way behind on so many social issues, and
Right.
but mental health and health in general is one
Absolutely.
of those things. There's, I mean, way too much to talk about here, but some of these things are very systematic, right? They've kind of been built in the fabric of our culture. And then you've got different ethnic cultures and even in faith cultures, right? So sometimes people are dealing with 4 or 5 different types of cultures in and of their
Right.
own lives that have different beliefs about these things. And so
Right,
they and
especially
that can
blended
get
families. If
strong.
you're Hispanic person with the Black person, they're coming
That's
from
right.
2 different
That's
realms.
right, and maybe, you could, be Christian or Islam, who knows, right? A lot
Absolutely.
of different things about, that, and sometimes just our family dynamic and culture in terms of, uh, strengths and weaknesses, right? Needing
Mhm.
help is a weakness versus, looking at as a strength, and so sometimes there's so many things that are coming at, and sometimes parents are willing to do things for their kids, like, well, maybe you need to see somebody or whatever. Well, but they are watching mom or dad, in distress all the
Mhm.
time. And it's like, no, I can't do it, or I don't need it, but you can. So that, believe it or not, what that kind of communicates to them is, well, shoot, something's wrong with me because I can't just be strong like them, but nothing's wrong, but really, but what the
Right.
parent is looking at as, even though I'm not ready, I'll do anything for my child, so there's no
Mhm.
bad things associated with that, but
Right.
what's communicated a lot of times by how we live and what we
Mhm.
do versus, I say to a lot of my parents whenever I'm working with their kids, long gone are the days of do as I say, not as I do. That
Mhm.
never
Yeah.
really worked back in the day either, but we had a different but people didn't
Mhm.
do it. We just didn't say anything about it, right? But now
Right.
it's like, no, that doesn't work. You listen, you got to live this thing out if you want
Yeah.
them to really trust and
Right.
believe that too.
Okay, well, I won't keep you too. I just got a couple more questions for you. What are the potential long-term effects on the family if the well-being of the child is not addressed? We look at there's like the 5 love languages that a lot of times
Yes,
we look at in regards to marriage, but there's also for the children what their
it
love
is.
language is.
Absolutely, and there's a book on that. He's got books on all of them. Yeah, and one of them is
Mhm.
the love languages for children. The potential long-term effects are vast, right? So we don't definitely don't have time to talk about all of them. But one thing I could say is when we talk about the future of our families and legacy and carrying things on, if we, families, you won't be able to thrive
Mhm.
if, in long term, if we're not taking care of some of these things along the way, because what's going to happen is you're going to be passing on unhealthy things. There's some things that we pass on in our DNA we have no control over. There are certain health, things, and even mental health sometimes if we've got genetic dispositions for things in families. But
Mm,
one thing we can control is our behavior
right.
and our choices and being able to learn from our mistakes and
Mhm.
making sure we are more informed and more educated and more loving and setting a better example and
Right.
passing that on to our children so that they can then pass it on to their children and each generation can get bigger and I
Mhm.
mean get better, I'm sorry. We
Mm,
used to talk about that a lot. I think there was a huge emphasis on, when we talk about leaving something for your children and your children's children, a lot of time people think that's financial. And there's huge emphasis on that. But I mean, that's so much. I mean, the health of our legacy and our generations are going to depend on us making sure that we are taking care of all of those needs we talked about before, physical, social, mental, educational,
mhm.
socioeconomic, all of it, making sure that we're showing our kids how to get their needs met.
Mhm.
And when they're not met, speaking up, communicating, having those safe spaces to go
Right.
to in order to express that so that they can get them met so that they can be healed and healthy and be able to pass that on.
Right, yeah, it ties into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it's like that
Yes,
safety and security and all
that's
those
right.
different things that it's
That's right.
important, and when you don't get
Huge.
it, you need to know how to express it,
That's
even
right.
if you're dealing with people who maybe they don't know how to express,
That's
so
right.
there's that, and
That's right.
that's where people like you come in, and mental health
That's right.
professionals come
I,
in to be able
that's
to
right.
help people, especially children.
That's
Well,
right.
lastly, how can and kinda doing the inverse of there's so much of the outside that can come in, how do your family dynamics within your house, how can that help you with picking your friends and things? I know for myself, I was an only child, so I would take whatever friend I could get because it was either that or be alone. And
That's
so there
right.
was a lot of, someone could be very mean to me or they could be bad influences. And it was just like, well, it's better to have a friend than no friend.
That's
So
right.
how can we kind of combat that thing as far as what the child's explaining to them? It's going to be better for your mental health that you're alone than hang out with someone who's mean to you.
I think it goes back to teaching those boundaries and teaching that everyone, like, everyone deserves love, compassion, empathy, but not always access.
Okay.
And talking to them and also teaching them, how to pick friends. Like, that we get to do that, you know what I mean? Like, we
Mhm.
we get to do that, and not in a way we're not talking about, like, being cliquey or selective in terms of, like, "Ew, I don't like you," or, "Oh, you
Mhm.
don't have the latest name brand," nothing like that, but
Right.
one thing that's important to teach our kids is to listen, and
Mhm.
learn, right? To watch and listen. First of all, that is a huge safety thing, in
Mhm.
terms of their physical safety, to be aware of their surroundings. But we
Mhm.
don't emphasize that enough about their emotional, well-being, is that sometimes you just need to sit back and observe and listen and
Right.
watch how people operate.
Mhm.
And to know that, well, hey, we get to say yes or no. And so we can be friendly with somebody, but that
Right.
may not be a friend of ours, because hey, if that person is, maybe we see them teasing someone, or they may be talking us negatively about somebody else, chances are they're doing the same about us. And so,
Right.
and of course it takes a lot to teach them and to encourage them, unless it comes natural to them, because some people are just outspoken and but to
Mhm.
how to kind of confront those things in a healthy manner, how to speak up, right? Whether it's for
Mhm.
themselves or somebody else.
Right.
But if we're showing them that and doing it at home, and again, we're talking about it from very little, that's
Mhm.
going to be important. Just a real quick example. So I grew up. I have a half brother, who were very close. So we never say half, but we never grew up in the same home, right? So I
Mhm.
grew up as an only child as well, and moving around a lot.
Mm.
And so, but one of the things that me and my mom talk about all the time about me is I've always had a pretty strong personality, right? But sometimes that can be perceived negatively. And so one of the
Mhm.
things she noticed very young was that I could tell, of course, she would say it was bossy, right? I don't remember. I just don't like. I don't really care if people do what I want to do, but if I would just tell people something, they would do it. And I
Mhm.
don't think that was my goal. It was just like, if they weren't saying what they want to do, it's like, okay, let's do this, and they would just do it, right? And so
Okay.
she was very quick and early, which amazes me, because, like I said, teenage mom and just young, but she very quickly would say, "Hey, like, you're not the boss of them. You don't get
Mhm.
to just tell them." And she could notice in them that, maybe kind of like that quality you were saying, that they were willing to do whatever I said just so I would
Mhm.
be their friend, even though I'm in, like, I'm your friend regardless. Like, it's not going to upset me that you don't want to do what I said, but they may not perceive that. And so
Mhm.
she was quick to point out that, hey, that you don't tell them what to do, you ask them.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong that I knew, right? But she
Mhm.
was just saying, because later people aren't going to like that. They may not want to play with you because they feel like you're bossing them around. And I'm like, well, they asked me what we should do. And she's like, yeah, but that's also like, how you say what you do. You can, and so that really helped. And so I think we have, again, while we're teaching our kids to be observant, whether it's verbally or visually, we need to be observing too.
Mhm.
We need to be making sure we're listening out when they're playing with food, and not just for the bad stuff. A lot of times we're looking, we need to intervene when something's wrong. But
Right.
sometimes we don't even need to intervene right then. But maybe, again, that communication in families is important. Over dinner, over a meal, whatever, we talk about, like, hey, when you and so and so, when you and Kim were playing earlier, I noticed, like, you said such and such. I don't know about Kim. Maybe she was okay with it, but if that was me, I would feel,
Mhm.
and really kind of, because we're the first relationships our kids have are with us. So we need
Right.
to teach them how to be relational.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you very much, LaKisha, for just giving me such great insight. You're really helping me just seeing within the field, excuse me, how just from childhood, and those different things of how the foundation of how we
Yeah,
communicate. Do we communicate? Is it healthy,
absolutely.
unhealthy? And being able to see all these. And like you said, I love that you stated that going to school, that's where children are most of the times. They're getting so much. I see now there's a lot of people who are choosing to do homeschooling because
That's
they
true.
want to be able to control how much,
That's right.
it's going into their child
Absolutely.
rather than give it to however many children to the system or whatever like that.
Sure.
So I really appreciate your time and just for answering these
Oh,
questions for me. It was very insightful, and it will definitely
good.
help with the project that I need to do.
Well, good. I'm glad I could help. Thank you so much for asking me. It was an
Not
honor.
a problem. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye, Kim.